Please no comments on how rough I look. I actually feel halfway decent. This has been an incredible journey. And many of you have gone through it. Appreciate your comments, those of you that have been through it. One thing I'm finding is that those that have suffered through this China virus, there's no two stories that are alike. There's some that are similar, but everybody has their own story. This is the most man-made, crazy virus. There's so many elements to it that everything is intertwined. And let me see if I can explain what I'm. The brain fog, right? I'm just gonna go off on things that are in my head. So I mentioned a while back there's a commercial in Utah, and it's this lady bringing her husband in, and it says that he's dying of COVID, but he doesn't have COVID. But the reason he's dying of COVID is that people who didn't get the jab are using all the hospital beds. So now this poor guy who's having a heart attack, who's dying, is technically dying of COVID because he has to go 90 miles to another facility because all the evil people that haven't received the jab are causing these people to die that legitimately should have a bed, and that those that haven't received the jab really shouldn't have a bed, and it's their own fault. You know, so what? Okay, so just think, this is a commercial put out by the state of Utah. So think of what that does mentally and spiritually, really, in dividing and blaming and shaming individuals who choose not to get the jab. It's wrong. It's super wrong to have a government entity. One thing that's really interesting is that there's no acknowledgement by our governor, anybody with the health department, on natural immunity. There's not one bit of acknowledgement that has any benefit. That those that overcome have COVID, and you know, I'll be damned if I'm going to go to a hospital and be used as an excuse that I caused the death of somebody else. I'm not doing that. You know, I'll sacrifice myself for that. This is so ridiculous that people are put into that situation. And then to not acknowledge that there's anything good with natural immunity, that it doesn't exist, that the only way you can have any kind of immunity is through the jab and the subsequent boosters. I'm telling you, I'm not anti-vax person. I've said this before. I probably grew up in that era where a lot of you did, where, you know, it was just part of life, you know, to get vaccinated for all kinds of different things. This is a different animal. And here's an interesting thing. I just, quick media, is it? Or the Quick Show. Many of you subscribe to that, and I'm sorry I can't remember the individual's name, but he's got the goatee and a very good radio voice. He did a show just a few days ago on Dr. Fauci, and what a criminal this guy is, and how he has such a conflict of interest. And I was shocked because the Quick Radio guy has been a proponent of the vaccine. just the mainstream, just right down the line. And now he's acknowledging what many of us have known for over a year about Dr. Fauci and his tie into Wuhan and the lab there. And so the interesting thing is you got to connect the dots. So if Fauci is tied into that, and we know now that that's where the virus originated, and that it was more likely released and modified, then continue the equation. Is who's pushing the vaccine? Who pushed for all these other things? The mask mandates and all the other things. Who was it? It was Fauci. Who is getting paid kickback money, the billions that are made by the pharmaceutical companies? Is Dr. Fauci somehow being compensated? Absolutely. So you create the virus that then requires a vaccine, and then that vaccine is required by the government, and then the pharmaceutical companies get compensated by taxpayer dollars. That's mandated. I mean, do you see the perfect storm here? And what the quick guy failed to do was make that last connection with the vaccine. But I suspect, that will come. But just the fact that he acknowledged Fauci, because you won't hear that from any kind of source from the church or from come follow me presentations. So I was pleased to see that. Not that he represents the church and he's not CES, but he's been pretty much down that main line of mainstream thinking, where you just get the vaccine, you play by the rules, and everything is fine. And you definitely don't say anything against China. Have you noticed that? Do not say anything against China. Now, our local government, Utah, they're towing the line. My guess is you cannot talk about natural immunity because you're being compensated by the government to push the narrative of the vaccine, and applauding any private sector who is demanding and mandating the vaccine. If you're going to get compensated for that, then you can't talk about natural immunity. You also can't talk about where this virus came from. Here's an interesting thing too with Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for Green Bay Packers. Wow, you talk about a guy that's getting maligned, attacked, and it's all these stupid ESPN sports commentators who are just blasting him and treating him like he's just the scum of the earth and betraying everybody, because he actually studied it, figured, this isn't for me, this isn't going to be good for my body, and I'm going to do all the things necessary. He was tested positive for COVID. The team knew about it. He's doing all the things that he needs to do to combat COVID. Here's the thing. He's the evil guy, according to media. You can YouTube all these sports guys and the mean things that they're saying about Aaron Rodgers. Now, like Aaron Rodgers, I get it. I know he's just a pretty left and liberal type of a guy. But I love his principle, of saying, no, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to be respectful, but on the other hand, this injecting this experimental drug into my body is not going to happen. And there's a whole slew of things I can do to develop those natural immunities. And see, that's the thing you can't talk about. You just cannot talk about it. Here's the interesting thing. What I was going to say is, nobody attacks China. Nobody attacks where this virus came from. And nobody wants to even touch that. It's like that. It's almost like blaming a gun for somebody's death instead of blaming the individual who pulled the trigger. It's the gun's fault. Or we hear that so-and-so or X amount of people were killed by an SUV. Like the SUV has a mind of its own, right? It eliminates the responsible party by repeating something over and over and over and over and over again. So now the evil people are the ones who don't get the vaccine. It has nothing to do with how the virus was created, has nothing to do with the evidence of from experts that talk about the jab, that talk about the effects of the virus, the effects of having natural immunity and then getting a jab afterwards, and what it does to that natural immunity. It's pretty fascinating. And now, guys, you got to be honest in this. You got to think about what was promised if you received this 90+% successful jab, that everything could go back to normal if you received it, and that you would be protected, that you couldn't get the virus, and also that if you received the jab, and also you wouldn't be able to spread it to others. All that's false news now. It was all fake. It was all a lie. So not only can you continue to get the virus, even if you've been jabbed, and even if you've had the subsequent boosters, but now they say, oh, but it will lessen the effects of that. Really? Well, how do you prove that? How do you prove that? You can't. That's an unprovable thing. So it's easy to just, so we've gone from, yeah, we can all go about and do our thing. Here's another interesting thing, is that if you've received the jab, but then you test positive for COVID, you can still go about doing whatever you want to do, because you're not going to spread it as easily as someone who hasn't had the jab. Now, does that make sense? If you have COVID and you've and I've self-quarantined, I've done that, because I don't want anybody to get what I have. I mean, this just China virus is for real. There's no question about it, and it's had a huge effect on Sue and I, both physically, but mentally and spiritually. It's had a huge effect. It's going to take some time to get over it and to get back into the swing of things. It's a very humbling thing. Developing the natural immunity is paramount for us. That's what the key is, because this is a long-term thing. a lasting thing for us. It's not waiting to get another booster for the next variant that comes. Because once you start down that road, that's where you have to go. That's where you have to go. And we've never seen anything like that, where things that we were vaccinated for one time, now it's in less than a year, you need another one, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one, not knowing. And remember when supposedly, I think it was the Pfizer that, it's been approved now, and that was all a lie by the FDA. It wasn't approved. It wasn't approved. And it still hasn't been approved. That was all a lie. It was how they presented it was that this future, the future one has been. Well, the future one hasn't come about yet. So the original one that they're using for the emergency application still hasn't been approved. And then now these young kids, 5 years old, getting these, where there's virtually no effect of the virus on these young people. So I don't know. I mean, I know I'm repeating a lot of things that we've all talked about, but so Aaron Rodgers is the villain, not China. People like Sue and I are the villains because we chose not to get the jab, but we somehow occupied some space that we had no right to occupy. Not in a hospital, not with the doctor, but just our existence. And this is perpetrated by our own government with these commercials that just state that those that don't get the jab are the cause of all these other people dying, which absolutely does not make sense. So anyway, that's a little bit of that. Now, I wanted to talk about just a couple of things that I've been taking the classes, the Messiah in the Old Testament. It's not necessarily to prove that Jesus is the Messiah of the Old Testament, although that's there, but just that the prophecies in the Old Testament are really prophecies about the Messiah. And then why the rabbinic Jews refute that. And I've talked a little bit about Rashi, probably 11th century rabbi, who really is kind of he's not necessarily the originator, but most people trace that to him. And explaining this away. Now, and quite often we think of this as a real negative, that he's trying to point and attack the Messiah as Jesus as nothing to do with these scriptures. And today we covered Isaiah 52 and 53, which are total messianic and really, you can just nail it down if you pardon the pun, but that Christ is the Messiah of the Old Testament. But where Rashi and other rabbis have gone with this is that they're combating a similar thing that Nephi in the Book of Mormon was combating, and that is Christianity in the sense of the great and abominable church. When you look at what they were combating, if you think of Nazi Germany, now this is way after Rashi, right? But in the minds of many rabbis, Hitler was a perfect Christian. Okay? So when you think of particularly the Catholic Church and its view on the Jews and the replacement theology, what you're having to do is defend Israel as a people versus looking at just that this messianic figure is Jesus Christ or not Jesus Christ. It's you're defending a whole Jewish nation. So instead of if you look at Isaiah 53, for Rashi and other rabbinic Jews, that would be referring not to one individual, but to a whole nation that's being persecuted. Okay, and so you can see the justification, and when we think of Nephi talking about this abomination of a church that actually uses the Messiah in a perverted way to persecute the Church of God, you can see the similarities. It's amazing. I never have tied those two together. So, in all reality, the idea of a perverted Christian church that justified the demise of the Jewish people, you can see where an interpretation of eliminating Christ as the Messiah in the Old Testament would be justified in that sense, and that it was really a nation of individuals combined that was being persecuted, that was being trodden down, because that's what happened, right? So I know this is a little convoluted, and I'm having a hard time explaining it, but you almost have to see that that Rashi and the rabbinic Jews were not only refuting all the Messianic Jews, but they're also refuting Christianity, because Christianity treated them in such a way that it would be hard to say, well, yeah, Christ really was the Messiah, and these people believe in Christ, but they're persecuting us. You see what I'm saying? So the Book of Mormon is it's just amazing how it's not only another testament of Jesus Christ, it's a testimony that the early Christian church was corrupt. And what we would call the Christian church, and many truths, plain and precious truths, were taken, and that's why it becomes politically incorrect to talk about it anymore, because we have to, love everybody and embrace everybody and every religion. But the covenant with Israel and the Abrahamic covenant, then through Isaac and then Jacob and on down, which included people, posterity, priesthood, and the property, the land. When that is ignored and said that is no longer applicable because the Jews did what they did, you're basically calling God a liar, because he says he never forgets his people. And the fact that they turned their back on him doesn't mean that he turned his back on them. Okay, so my feeling is that we have to have a lot more compassion for the children of Israel and the Jews in particular, and instead of just immediately going, well, they rejected the Messiah, so therefore they're done. Now think of all the Jews that didn't reject the Messiah. That's what the New Testament is full of. They were Jews that were Messianic Jews. They believed in the Old Testament. The Old Testament, I could go through some scriptures here that are just amazing. Matthew 8:17, Mark 15:28, Luke 22:37, Acts 8:32 through 35. These are all references to Isaiah, all references to, because think of it, these Jews that we call the apostles of the Lord Jesus Christ, there was no New Testament. This was the Torah, the law, as well as the prophets testifying of the Messiah. And then these individuals were now not only testifying of themselves that Christ was the Messiah, but they repeated the words of the Christ. And if you think about it, the only time Christ really debated anybody was the Pharisees, the scribes and Pharisees, because there was common ground. They had both studied the Old Testament. And so Christ had a basis of which to debate. If they hadn't had that, there would be no reason for debate. But Christ is like, hey, look, this is me. This prophecy is about me. And so the fact that they were Messianic Jews back then, they're still Jews. They're still Jewish people. They weren't like Christians in the sense that they gave up everything to do with Jewish law. They didn't. They were Jews, both ethnically as well as religiously. But they recognized that the Messiah prophesied in the Old Testament was Jesus Christ. And so from that expanded to the Gentile nations, which we know that Christ said, okay, it's time to open this up. And the Messianic Jews at that time did not require, this is key, the Messianic Jews at that time did not require Gentiles to become Jews. Okay? But the rabbinic Jews at the time, or the Pharisees, the Pharisaical Jews, they wanted converts as well. But if you were a Gentile, you converted and believed and practiced everything that you did, and then you were like born again, and you were no longer a Gentile. You became a Jew. In fact, you could even marry your sister because you weren't related to her anymore, because you become a Jew. So there was some kind of weird things like that. But you could see where a Gentile who was a Messianic Jew, or excuse me, a Messianic Christian, they could convert without changing. It was just their belief in Christ. And that's what connected them. And so the Messianic Jews didn't require Gentiles to change. Okay? So that's where the debate, some of the debates in the book of Acts and whatnot about circumcision. Do you need to be circumcised to be, because that was a big thing. Because you don't just give up your Jewishness. However, if you're a Gentile and wanted to be a follower of Yeshua or Jesus Christ, there was this thought of, well, do I need to be circumcised if I'm male? And the answer came, no, you don't. You continue being who you are, but ultimately we follow Christ. We follow Christ. So this is all really fascinating to me because it ties directly in with the Book of Mormon, in my opinion, with the idea of in the name of Messiah, in the name of Jesus, there was a perversion and a corruption of the church that really caused a bitterness to happen with the Jewish people. And to use Christ's name to do that is the abomination. That is the that to me constitutes the great and abominable church, is using Christ to persecute a whole group of people. I think that makes sense. I wanted to tell you a really interesting story about the professor that we had today. So good. This was his first time. We'd had one professor for 5 or 6 lessons, and then this professor was covering Isaiah 52 and 53, but in a different way than what you would think. But he was raised in a kibbutz. A kibbutz is a Jewish community, quite often not. It's just secular, right? And very communistic. And he was raised right up in northern Israel. And first off, he said that the idea of working for money never even entered his mind until he got out of the military. You do a 2-year stint of military. This professor is probably in his 50s. So this was, 30 plus years ago. And he realized that people worked for money. Well, in the kibbutz, you don't do that. Everything is communal. And you work because that's the thing you do. It's not to trade to get something. It's just the honorable thing to do is work. And then as a result, you share in it. A really funny story he told about his parents. So when his parents were married, there was only one dress, and there was another couple to be married. So as soon as his mom and dad were married, she had to hurry and take the dress off and give it to the next bride who was going to be married. That's how tight this community was. Well, one of their wedding gifts was a fry pan. And the very next day after the wedding, a neighbor lady came, older lady, and she said, you received a fry pan for a wedding gift. I want it. And the bride was this professor's mom. She said, that was a gift to us. That was our wedding gift. That's ours. And she said, no, it's part of the kibbutz. It's part of our community. And I want it. I want to use it. Well, it became a huge debate in the community. And so the case had to be taken to the lawgivers of the kibbutz. And they debated this all night long as to what to do with the fry pan and who has rights to it. And what ended up happening was the couple, the young married couple, was able to retain the fry pan. However, they could never use it. That's what the decision was. And he said, my parents are in their 80s, and that, excuse me, the fry pan sits in top of the closet and it's never been used. So we laugh about things like that, but think of how, we've talked about the United Order. We've been reading in the Doctrine and Covenants about this society where all things are in common, and it couldn't quite come about. And then you think of these Jewish kibbutz and how they've lived, and how they get where all things are in common, and at some point you have these issues that come up. It's pretty incredible where these things exist right while we're living, and we have no clue about it. Now, this was a few years ago, but still, those communities exist, where it's a Zionist type thing, where all things are in common, and yet people struggle with those kind of things. So I hope this has been a little helpful discussion. I'm amazed at the kindness of all you folks, and all the good. There's Sue's really struggled with this, probably more than I have. Although I don't want to lessen mine, but this has really been a tough deal for Sue. She's had aches and weakness and all kinds of things, but I think she's getting stronger and getting better. Today seems to be the best day so far for her. Me, I think mine was more of a mental struggle as much as it was a physical one. It's just lasted so long, and the spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. I feel like with this, my spirit was weak, my flesh was weak. I can't describe how frustrating it's been. I've been sick before. I've had kidney stones where I was crawling and screaming in pain like I've never had before, and I've had accidents and surgeries, and it's just stuff like all of you have had. But this one was so different, and it still is a struggle in the sense of it's like you're fighting other battles. You're fighting a societal battle. You're fighting a religious battle. You have this conflict in society about the jab, and then that's expanded within the very church you belong to, and then the idea of following the prophet and doing what you're supposed to there, and that all that adds to the conflict, and yet there's this conviction of following the prophet, respecting the keys, sustaining him, and our church leaders in the organization that houses the ordinances and the covenants, and yet still having an idea of being personally responsible for what I do and how I take care of my body, and not putting all that responsibility on them for that. All that combined creates this just kind of a turmoil that has never existed before that I can think of. So, you know, you have, you want to belong, and you want to be a part of a faith organization that you believe is the only true church that's on the earth, that has all the keys, the authority, God's kingdom on earth, and you want to be a part of that. And yet there's a faction of, if you don't do this and this and this, then you're not a part of that. Which just seems so odd to me, so foreign, that contributes to the frustration and the uneasiness of it all. And I suspect it has an effect on how well you recover, because if you have a, you know, more of a positive outlook, you know, I'm convinced that's very beneficial. But if in the back of your mind you're going, gosh, you know, where do I fit here? Where do I fit here? How do I fit into this whole organization and people? Now, this channel and others where we have like a support group that's been just huge, and people have helped us tremendously. Now, I've talked about some of the medication. I've purchased some from Mexico. I've purchased some through an online doctor that you pay a certain fee for. And then there's an online pharmaceutical. I had some people send us some stuff. I'll just say it that way, and it's been amazing. I will say that I'm getting tired of so many supplements and so many things. It's just like my body is just like, man, I don't know. I just want to get better. And so, yeah, so I know I'm rambling here, but this is a more complicated issue than just being sick, right? It's having, you know, the people within the church, the community, and friends and family, you know, who there's a conflict there, and when you see one person like an Aaron Rodgers who bucks the system, and you see the attacks, you know it's a real deal. It's a real thing, and when you cannot attack the source of the virus, that's just, you just can't do that. Well, you can look at the NFL, the NBA, and professional sports generally. It's basically owned by China, and so you can see why that would be. But then your own government and then certain entities in the church that go against that as well. You're like, gosh, you know, where do I fit in? So when these combine, you know, these questions combined with just the fact that you don't feel very well and you're really struggling, it can really mess with you. And so you continue to study and pray and stay focused on the things at hand. and things will work out. I'm convinced. And these are the real tests. I I think if there's no test, we're not being prepared for what lies ahead. And I feel like this has been a really good test, and that Sue and I are passing that test, and staying strong. And it's not been easy, but we stick together, and we love each other. We don't judge others. I've learned a lot about that. Even though people have a different view on the jab than I do, and I'm just supportive that whatever they want to do, I would hope that they would afford me the same without the judgment. So that's it. Okay, I've talked enough. Onward and upward. I love you all. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.